All right, let's dive into a really chilling urban legend. This one comes from a tiny coastal town in Spain called Salo Lucia. And trust me, it's a story that starts out looking like a perfect vacation postcard, but it ends in a place of absolute terror. So just picture this, a small, hilly town right on the sea. You've got these beautiful white-walled houses, super narrow streets, and the sound of a church bell ringing every hour. During the day, Sala Lucia is honestly picture perfect. It's calm, it's beautiful, it feels totally safe. But then, the sun sets, and everything changes. A strange kind of cold just seeps into the air. Those charming little streets, they become completely empty. The whole town just takes on this silent, chilling vibe, almost like a graveyard. You can tell this place is hiding a dark secret. And that secret is exactly what this story is all about. It centers on a young man who came to study the town's amazing architecture. But, well, he ended up discovering its horror instead. Okay, so this is Mateo Guerrero. He's 19, a bright architecture student from Madrid, and he's in Salo Lucia to study and sketch its ancient buildings. And he's a sharp kid, you know? He pretty quickly picks up on something weird. The moment evening starts to creep in, the locals just disappear. The streets are completely empty after dark. While he's researching this old cemetery near the church, Mateo finds something that just doesn't belong. It's this old, broken-down wedding arch standing right next to a grave, which is odd. It's covered in these withered, dried-out flowers, and he notices the ground underneath it is stained, like a much darker color than the dirt around it. This is really the first clue. That very night, right after he finds that arch in the cemetery, things start to get really strange for Mateo. It begins with small stuff, things you might try to convince yourself you imagined. Almost. First, he hears these really faint footsteps, like the rustle of a long dress, just outside his guest house window. Then, he swears he catches a glimpse of someone in a long white gown at the end of the street, but they vanish in a second. The next night, this unnatural chill just floods his room, and when he looks outside, he sees fresh, wet, muddy footprints on the dry stone street. And this is the part that is just bone-chilling. Mateo realizes these footprints aren't just random. They're leading in one very specific direction, straight back towards the old cemetery, and right towards that creepy, decaying wedding arch. So his curiosity kind of gets the better of his fear, and Mateo decides he has to follow them. As he gets to the cemetery, the church bell starts to toll. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. He is completely and totally alone. And there, standing under that broken arch, he sees her, a woman, standing perfectly still in what looks like a really old, tattered wedding dress. Her face is covered by a white veil, and she looks like she's just waiting for someone. He gets a little closer, and the woman turns. Her veil shifts just enough, and what Mateo sees just freezes him to the spot. Her face is a ghostly, deathly white. Her eyes are completely empty, and what he thought were maybe tear tracks, they're dried streaks of blood. But the most horrifying part? Her feet aren't even touching the ground. Terrified, Mateo just runs. I mean, who wouldn't? He doesn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, he goes straight to the old caretaker of the guest house and demands to know what he saw. The caretaker, his face pale with fear, finally tells him the town's cursed story. The story starts way back in 1889. A young woman, Isabella Romero, was supposed to get married right there, at an arch they'd set up by the cemetery. But her groom, a man named Javier, never came. He'd actually run off with another woman. Isabella, just completely heartbroken, waited all night long in the cold. By the morning, they found her dead. The townspeople always said she died from the shock, from a broken heart. They buried Isabella right there in the cemetery. But ever since that tragic night, the locals claimed to see her ghost, a woman in a tattered wedding gown, standing under the arch, just still waiting. They call her the Dead Bride. Now, you'd think hearing the story would be the end of it for Mateo, but it's not. In fact, things are about to get so much worse, because the spirit isn't just waiting at the cemetery anymore. Now, it seems, she's focused entirely on him. That night, the footsteps come back, but this time, they don't pass by. They stop right outside his door. The air in his room fills with this sickeningly sweet smell of decay, like wet mud and rotting flowers. He watches in pure horror as his doorknob slowly starts to turn. It stops. The door creaks open to an empty hall, but when he looks over at his window, her terrifying face is right there, just staring in at him. The next morning, Matteo is frantic. He runs to the local priest, who tells him this spirit has never, ever been this aggressive. He asks Matteo a really important question. Did you take anything from the cemetery? And that's when Matteo realizes the terrible mistake he made. On his first visit, just as a souvenir for his research, he'd picked up a few of those dried flowers from the wedding arch. The priest explains the terrifying truth. By taking a piece of her wedding, the spirit of Isabella now believes that he is Javier, that her groom has finally come back for her. The priest's warning couldn't be more serious. He tells Matteo he has to get out of Santa Lucia right now, because now that the dead bride has chosen him, she will never, ever let him go. And just like that, everything descends into chaos. Matteo sprints back to the guest house to pack his things, but he sees muddy footprints are already leading up to his door. He looks outside, and the afternoon sky is turning pitch black. The lights inside start flickering like crazy before the room is plunged into total darkness. A flash of lightning illuminates the entire room, and there she is. Not outside the window, not down the hall. She is standing right in front of him. Matteo lets out one final, terrified scream. The guest house caretaker heard that scream and came running, but by the time he managed to force the door open, it was already too late. Matteo was gone. A few hours later, they found his body back in the cemetery. He was lying directly underneath that broken wedding arch, and his clothes were covered in that same wet, dark mud. The townspeople all believe the dead bride finally got her groom, dragging him away to be with her forever. And that leaves us with one final haunting thought. If the dead bride took Matteo, did her long, lonely wait finally end? Or, now that death has abandoned her once again, is her spirit still standing under that arch, waiting in the darkness for the next person who makes a fatal mistake?